Hello, my name is Bill Haley, and this is for Haley 2024 The Movement's Government Reform Ideas. Now, this video is going to be on the prison and corrections sector. We are creating a new constitution for the United States, replacing the state constitutions and actually making local constitutions. We're going to a more competitive governance type of government, a lot more freedom, a lot more free enterprise. If you want socialism, you can have it, but only within the group of people who vote to have that socialism. It's a competitive governance, so you select what type of governance you want. And let's go through the full system so you understand what the system is. Then we'll come back and we'll touch on the prison and corrections. So, first thing you have to understand is we split all government power into 30 sectors. Top level elected leaders per sector. There's no one person that's in charge of more than one sector at a time. So if you're in charge of law enforcement, you're in charge of food. If you're in charge of prisons, you're not in charge of environmental policy. People who are in charge of roads are not in charge of family law. The commander-in-chief is different than regulating food. So we have all 30 sectors separated. When you go to elect leaders, you first you judge it based off that sector and that sector's responsibilities. So you got 30 times more elections than we currently have now. All the government power is divided. It's not multiplied, it's divided. So everybody has a smaller piece of the pie. So you get to pick what type of government you want per sector. So let's go through the next one, and this is where it's more important. Within each sector, at every level of government, there's roughly 12 different competitive regulatory agencies. As long as you can get 5% of the citizens within your jurisdiction, local, state, or federal jurisdiction, as long as you have 5% of the people, you can have your own CRA. It's a private/governmental organization. It's private because it only governs their members. But it's governmental because you have governmental powers, but only over top of their members. It has executive, legislative, and judicial powers. Now, there's a lot of checks and balances within the system. We have two very strong governmental oversight or representative oversights where anybody with inherent government power has to be authorized by the 70% of the representatives of the United States or the state or your locality. So let's go through even further, and we'll go through the whole system. Let's touch on the rating system first. The rating system is going to have the same structure as the CRA side, but it's going to give high quality information from a wide variety of perspectives. And it's also going to set standards where you cannot go lower, and rating floors are only there to stop significant negative externalities. If you're harming people outside of the transaction, if you're harming people overall, there's a limit to that, and there's a rating floor to set that limit. And that rating system, made up of the RAs, the rating agencies, will create that limit. So more things do not have to go up to the monopolized sector board level. A couple things will, but most things are going to be at the CRA level. So let's keep on going through. We have a really great preamble, a section called citizenship, a section called for just general laws. The bylaws are internal governance of any of the organizations within the structure. Federal, state, and local, how we split that up. One constitution for 3 levels of government, same constitution. Original authority, what level of government has the top level authority, and we do that per sector. What level of the CRA structure has top level authority, and we do that per sector. If it does go up to a monopolized sector board level, you have to have a supermajority of 70% to do it. Therefore, it's going to keep more things down at the CRA level. The structure of the parent sector board, I have a full video on there. Basically, they separate all government power into the 30 sectors, and they draw the lines. The CRA sector boards, they govern their sector within their either the local, state, or federal, and they manage the CRAs underneath them. They manage them only with the power that the CRAs give them. If the representatives think that it needs to go up to a monopolized control, it's very hard to get there because the whole system does not allow too much to go to the monopolized control. Basically, you need to have 70% of the judiciary to say it's a significant negative externality. The rating system has to try to put a rating floor on it first. If that still does not work, they can authorize the CRA sector board to regulate within that area, so it's done across the board. So it's not going to be very easily. It's going to keep a lot more down at the CRA level. CRAs are going to be 90% of what this is. Everything else within this Constitution helps support the CRAs, the competitive regulatory agencies. The CRAs and the RAs are where you get all your representation. And we actually have representation here versus our current system. It's not very easy to call our current House of Representatives because they're representatives over all these people, hundreds of thousands of people with a variety of interests, a variety of opinions, so they can't represent two different people with two different opinions. Okay, so let's keep on going on. The rating system is highly valuable. Look at that video, but we'll touch on a little bit more in a little bit. Taxation, everything that's currently paid for right now through government is going to be paid for through competitive regulatory agencies. So when you select your CRA per sector, and you have to select one per sector, you pay the fees for your CRA. If you pick the lowest cost one for everything, then they're not going to give you the best of services, or you're going to have to pay more in the free enterprise system to do what those services are. So police or education or whatever the case may be, we'll touch on all that. Debt, how we deal with the current system's debt, the current government's debt versus going to the new system. I have everything covered. Mainly we sell off everything that government currently owns, from naval bases to ships to schools to roads. Everything the government currently owns, we sell off to the free enterprise system or to the CRAs, and we go to the new structure. That might not pay off everything, but it's going to get close, and we have a mechanism in there to pay off everything. Pockets of freedom, it's an immigration and foreign policy position, and look at that video. States partial acceptance per sector is to help get this thing passed through the Article 5 of the current Constitution, and to get enough support. The separation of responsibilities and authorities into 30 sectors, that's highly important to understand. And let's go through the 30 sectors real quick. We get rid of government welfare altogether. We go to a full charity system, and that charity system has a mandated contribution to basically $1 trillion or 5% of GDP is the goal. Other sectors in there that you can see in there, the foreign protection system, again, top elected leaders per sector. The legislative branch or the executive branch are different for each of these sectors. The top diplomat is different than the top commander-in-chief. It should be because what we're doing right now causes some conflicts of interest. We have more checks and balances within the system, much better accountability, and it's a better system. So, violent crime mitigation system, we're talking about prisons now, so it's within this system, the definition of violent crime, the actual police, the societal oversight of the law enforcement authorization, and we had that for the military as well. That was sector, I believe, Sector 10, Military Authorization Agency. Anybody with inherent government power has to be authorized by representatives of the people. So that's highly important, and you need a 70% authorization as well. 70% of the representatives of 70% of the people is the best way to say it. The court system is Sector 14, and then if they are legitimately prosecuted and convicted through Sector 14, the court system, then they could go into the prison and corrections system. So let's go through this. Here's 5 more sectors, 5 more sectors, and 5 more sectors. Again, each one of these with a separate legislative branch, executive branch, and judicial branch. Each one of these has a full set of 12 different CRAs that people choose from. And so there's a lot there. Competitive regulatory agencies, I'm going to say it again, it's so important to keep on understanding that these are full governmental systems with executive, legislative, and judicial branches. They regulate, they govern, and they send representatives. So it's highly important to understand what they do. It's important to keep on understanding city, state, and federal. So here it is again to understand everything that's going on. The violent crime mitigation system is where it's at, where we're dealing with today. And let's go through some clauses. You have to understand that, let me go back to this one right here. All these things have a full set of clauses. I have a lot of clauses within the Constitution. I'm not going to read them all, but just the graphic I put up there showing how you select your CRA, you pay for your CRA through your CRA fees, and the whole 9 yards. All the clauses are within this. So let's go through and let's go through some actual clauses. This one's going to be more generic, but it's relevant to the prison sector. So every person with inherent government authority within the violent crime mitigation system must gain authority from the LEA, Law Enforcement Authorization Sector Board, and pledge allegiance to the LEA leadership. So highly important to understand that anybody with inherent government power, which anybody running a prison, anybody who is anybody's running a prison, anybody who's a prison guard, anybody who works in that industry, they have to be authorized by the LEA. At least if they're not, well, most people. They'll figure out who needs to have it. Definitely the guards, definitely the prison company as a whole and everything. The janitors, I'm not sure, but you will see. The VC rating system must set rating floors per narrowly drawn violent crime rate category. So that's rape, murder, carjacking, house invasions, stabbings, whatever the case may be. The violent crime rating system, so representative body, they must set a rating floor per crime rate, violent crime rate. If that's exceeded, punishments within the prison system has to increase. Well, the courts will actually do it, but then the prisons will have to implement it. You're going to have to fund the prisons even more. The VC Sector Board must set a bar regarding severity of crime for the death penalty cases. I'm not going to go through everything right now, but basically what this says is you have to have a higher bar than the reasonable doubt, beyond a reasonable doubt category. It has to be above that, way above that. And then the evidence needs to be quick enough coming in to have a very quick 30-day trial and then put to death within about 40 days. So it's highly important to understand that we have a system, but we need to be putting people to death if the crime was that heinous, a murder, a very serious brutal rape, and the like. The LEA sector authorizes with a 70% vote and repeals authorization with a 40% vote, but there's other clauses within this amendment that allows the rating floors. If this does not get enough staffing, if 35% of the people or representatives say we're not going to accept anybody in the system or not enough people to staff up the law enforcement, then the rating floors will play a role and will create a system where we will have enough police officers, enough prison guards and the like. Sector 15, prisons and corrections. So we're talking about the prison and correction clauses now. Now, all the other clauses within the whole Constitution matters tremendously. How you create a CRA, with the CRAs, how they get funded, how they do elections, how they are selected. All these things matter. But I have a few things just for prison and corrections. The prison and corrections sector is established. Establishing a sector means they get roughly 12 different CRAs. Again, 5% of the population just needs to get together, create a CRA, then they're a government body. The purpose of the prison and corrections sector is to provide prisons and corrections to people lawfully convicted of crimes and sentenced. So the court has to do that. There's a lot of checks and balances within that. So once it comes out of there, then the prison and correction people, they'll have the moral authority to hold these people and punish them, keep them behind bars, and keep them secure from the population. Government prisons and corrections infrastructure will transition to the free enterprise system, thus subject to the Section 12 standard transition. Everything current government currently owns will be sold to the free enterprise system or to at least to the CRAs. That includes every prison. CRAs of all sectors fund prisons resulting from those convicted through its CRA's judicial system. So it has to be convicted through the court system. Sector 15's CRAs may only, that's the prison sectors, the CRAs may only imprison people that were properly convicted and sentenced by Sector 14. I didn't want there to be any misunderstandings. The prison sector cannot just pull anybody off the road or go through a makeshift court system that's not authorized. It has to go through the accountability of the court system. There's accountability even within the free enterprise system. Free enterprise never means do as you wish, do whatever you want to do. You cannot do negative externalities, and their civil liberties have to be protected. A due process and just certain standards have to be met. There's a lot that the court system can do for productivity purposes and efficiency purposes. A lot of things they can experiment with, but they can't have standards so low as to infringe civil liberties and or due process of law, fair procedures, and the like. So the judicial branches in every part of the CRA structures are considered part of Sector 14. I didn't want there to be any misunderstandings. That might not mean a lot to you if this is one of the first videos you have seen. You have to study the CRA structure to really understand that. The Sector 15 rating system must set a rating floor sufficient for proper funding levels. So, CRA fees that you select, they have to charge enough per CRA fee to have a proper prison. Prisons, and there'll be a rating floor for that. Prisons and correction businesses may require labor hours of people convicted and in their custody. So they're allowed to work the prisoners. Prison labor may commingle with the charity economy. You have to understand what the charity economy is. I have full videos on that, but it's going to allow people to work in many different aspects. So prisoners helping out the poor to save money from helping the poor. There's a lot of money that needs to be spent to help the poor. Prisoners doing their labor hours to help the poor can be a very powerful funding mechanism or help to the poor. The Sector 15 rating system must set a rating floor on abuse in many categories. So the rating systems have a legitimate constitutional obligation to root out fraud, abuse, and a whole bunch of things. Anything that's low integrity or the lack of integrity. Anything that's abuse or self-dealing, illegal self-dealing, and the like. Every Sector 15 CRA must proportionally take custody of people properly convicted of Sector 11 crime. So, every CRA, if a CRA, a prison, which is Sector 15, CRA, they must supply the prisons. Either private prisons underneath them that they regulate, or the CRAs buy the prison themselves, do the labor contracts themselves, however they want to structure it. Whether it's having several private businesses underneath them, or having everything that they hire and build on their own. So if CRA, let's say 1, has 10% of the population supporting them, then they have to take 10% of the prisoners. If you have 14%, you take 14%. If you have 6% of the population supporting you, you take 6% of the prisoners. So that's proportional. Where the term proportionality must consider many factors of expenses as determined by the sector board. What I'm talking about here is somebody who's 85 years old, they're still in prison, they're not able to get many labor hours, they're very expensive to take care of with medical and the different things. That obviously they're going to get more money, so their proportionality, they're going to have a higher weight in that proportionality. Where you get 2 or 3 25-year-olds that are not violent, they can put to work, very low expense to keep them in prison, but very high expense to put somebody else in prison. So there's many factors of how expensive it is to hold a prisoner. 25-year-olds that are nonviolent. They caught up in something, but on the most part they're nonviolent. Maybe they shouldn't be in prison in the first place, but let's say they are. Very low expense to keep them in prison, higher expense to keep somebody else in prison. That's what we're talking about with proportionality and the many factors. Okay, 50% of the funding needed for violent crime prison terms must come from a citizen head tax. So every CRA for the citizens have to have the exact same tax per citizen. So it might be $100, it might be $200. I'm not sure exactly how much it's going to be. I think I ran the numbers. It's not a tremendous amount of money that we as Americans spend on prisons per person, but 50% of it comes from a head tax. So it's important that we understand. That way everybody has their equal representation. Their money has that power going to the prisons. We don't want just the millionaires and billionaires who have to fund everything so much that they control everything. We don't want them controlling everything. We want everybody's money, which is power, which is representative power, to have that power. Okay, let me start again. 50% of the funding needed for violent crime prison terms must come from a citizen head tax paid to a citizen's CRA in Sector 15. So you do this on the local level, federal level, and state level. So it's important to understand. Now, the other 50% is going to come from businesses, from sales taxes. So 50% of the funding needed for the violent crime prison terms must come from businesses and organizations proportional to sales, so a certain percentage of sales tax. It doesn't say what sales tax is. It's not 50% sales tax. 50% of the funding needed comes from a sales tax. It will have to be consistent sales tax across this locality, or across the state, or across the federal government. But then that goes to the sector board. So you have one monopolized sector board, and they're going to use the rating system to distribute that money. So let's go through that real quick. The Sector 15 sector board must use the Sector 15, the prison rating systems, ratings as a significant factor in funding prison and corrections, CRAs. So if somebody has really good ratings, they're going to get more money than somebody that has really poor ratings. So they're going to, everybody will still get funded with some of the sales tax, but the factor of good ratings versus bad ratings are going to be extremely important. So people will be competing. These prison companies will be competing. The prison CRAs will be competing for the best ratings, because the better ratings are going to come with more money. So, ratings as a significant factor in funding prison and correction CRAs with the goal of improving ratings. So it's highly important to understand that the goal is to improve ratings, and if nobody wants to belong to a CRA that has low ratings in the first place. So if you have to select from 12 different CRAs for prisons, and one has a rating of 40, which is going to be kind of low, one's going to have a rating of 80, which is going to be pretty darn high, people are going to want to go to the 80 and put their money towards that one. They're going to have that their money's being used better, more efficiently, more productivity, and better policies. Now, what are the ratings going to be factored on? Let's go through that. Ratings must include, so I usually don't say what ratings are going to include, but in the prison sector, I stated it. So usually the rating agencies just determine a lot. And they're still going to have a lot of leeway on how they determine this. But ratings must include, in large part, restoration, compensation, and reparations to the victims. So anything dealing with trying to solve the harm that they created. If they stabbed somebody, or they punched somebody, they did an armed robbery, they did arson, are they compensating? Are they restoring? Are they doing reparations to their victims? As well as, it's two parts, as well as low recidivism rates and personal long-term prospering of the people convicted. So, a lot of people, they don't want to consider, hey, you murdered somebody, you stabbed somebody, you did an armed robbery, we're going to throw you away from society, and even if you get out of prison, we don't want anything to do with you. Well, that's not a very good and positive thought pattern, because they'll go back to their life of crime too easily. We want a prison and correction, which means parole as well, that can take these people and make sure they're working, make sure they have low-cost housing, make sure they have a place to live that's safe, make sure they get into some men's groups or women's groups or whatever the case may be for a positive influence, and some counseling and the like, and work these people and do a lot of things, a lot of programs to make sure we have low recidivism rates. That's how we get our crime rate down. And if you have low rating on all these things, you're not going to get so much of the money, and the people and the citizens aren't going to want to choose you. So you're going to go defunct or drop below the 5%, and then once you drop below 5%, you give up your CRA, and all the members have to go to a legitimate CRA. Okay, pretty much over with. I just wanted you to show you all 30 sectors here. Here's the 15 again, so you understand where we're going. Look at the charity economy. Look how we do the charity system to understand where these prisoners might be able to do some work. It might just be making money, making license plates. I know that's kind of the old standard, but cleaning up roads is another thing they do. But they can do so much more. There's a lot of things we can do with prisoners and give them actual work to do, because we want them to be trained in something productive, so when they get out, they can stay with that and have a life, not in crime, but a life where they can make an honest living. And then you can look at how all these places, all these sectors are going to be sending people to prison, by the way. When you do an environmental crime, or you do a labor law crime, when you do a crime against land and water, a theft, or whatever the case may be, it's hard for me to understand or think about it right now while I'm doing a video. But education crimes, manufacturing crimes, I mean, a lot of these, unless it's violent crime, I doubt they're actually going to prison behind bars. Most of the corrections, I'm hoping within the other sectors, are not going to be behind bars, but it's going to be an anklet on the wrist. It's going to be community service. It's going to be extra hours in the charity economy. It's going to be parole officers looking after you in many different ways. And the experimentation of the sectors, of the prison CRAs, of the parole boards and the like, parole officers, the experimentation to have somebody live a prosperous life and to get them the counseling needed. It's going to be very important. But also, are they compensating reparations to the victim that they victimized while they're in prison? Okay, again, it's always important to come back to this screen. You pick this prison CRA that you want. You pick the prison rating system that you want, and that rating agency, that's going to come with actual power now, funding power, because the way they rate each prison CRA is going to determine funding going to them to a large degree. So that's going to be highly important. But it's also going to give high quality information from a wide variety of perspectives, so everybody can read up on that. Okay, this is June of 2021. Probably by the end of July of 2021, I'll have all my videos. Then I'm going to really update my website with all the videos incorporated, really incorporate a lot of these constitutional clauses. Everything's on my website right now, but I'm going to work on getting that better, and then do some new projects. But please consider a donation to Haley 2024, the movement. I'm trying to get a social media person. I work a full-time job myself right now in sales, so I want to have enough money coming in to at least replace half my income, and then I will be able to do this more full-time. So please consider a donation to the Haley 2024, the movement. And the term Haley 2024, by the way, obviously my last name is Haley. By the year 2024, I started this in 2013, and I was hoping by the year 2024 I would have significant progress on these ideas. And it's 2021 right now, and hopefully in 3 years I can make some movement on this. But until the next video.